Welcome into today's edition of Hand Raised Guys, presented by Comer Heating and Air, Southern Air Conditioning and Heating. I'm Neal McCready. Today on the show, Chase Parham will visit with Ole Miss Athletics Director Keith Carter about a number of topics, including Ole Miss's trip to the College World Series, which begins on Saturday, 6 p.m. against Auburn. Talked about that all week. We'll continue to talk about that today. Jeffrey Wright of 92.9 FM ESPN in Memphis joins as well. He and I talk about Ole Miss baseball, the College World Series. We switch to some NBA topics as well. So pretty good show planned for you here for the next hour and a half or so. Before we jump into that, I want to tell you that we're brought to you by Comer Heating and Air, Southern Air Conditioning and Heating. Same great products, just different names. Same people, same products, same service, just different names. If you live in Oxford or Tupelo and that surrounding area, get in touch with the people at Comer, 662-801-1777. If you're in Memphis, Hernando, Olive Branch, that area, get in touch with the people at Southern, 662-429-4429. It's obviously blazing hot outside. If you have an air conditioning issue, you want great service from people who know what they're doing and who will do it quickly, and that's Comer, and that is Southern. I'm coming to you from the Clark Ford Studios. Clark Ford is in Amory, Mississippi. 662-257-1900 is the number. That's the number to call. Call it. Ask for Corey Clark. Tell Corey what Ford product you're looking for. He will send you a quote within 15 minutes in business hours, right to the bottom line. No hassle, no haggle. You get your quote. The rest completely up to you. You can shop that quote around. You can do what I've done, what I recommend that you do, and that's hop into a Clark Ford today. 662-257-1900. Keith Carter, Jeffrey Wright, all other guests join on the Rafters Music and Food Hotline. Rafters Music and Food on the Square in Oxford. Great place to grab a burger, a po' boy, appetizers, great beer selection, full bar. They'll have the TVs on. College World Series, NBA Finals, NHL Stanley Cup Finals. You got a lot going on. Get out of the heat, enjoy a cold beer, an appetizer, and spend some time at Rafters. Also Rafters in New Albany. And don't forget about Rafters on the Water out at Sardis. If you're in Oxford, didn't make the trip to Omaha, and you're getting set for a party on Saturday for the College World Series, suggest going by LB's, 2008 University Avenue in Oxford. LB's Meat Market. They got all the freshest cuts, whatever you're looking for. They've got it, whether it's beef or pork or chicken, seafood, house-made sausages, stuffed jalapeno poppers, all of that stuff there at LB's. You won't regret it. Tell Greg and the people at LB's that you heard about them here on Hand Raised Guys, and they'll usually throw a little something extra in your bag. They're at LB's Meat Market, 2008 University Avenue in Oxford, right across the street from Kroger. So without further ado, Chase Parham visited with Keith Carter on Wednesday, the Ole Miss Athletics Director. Had an interesting conversation. I think you'll enjoy it. Here it is.
Ole Miss Athletics Director Keith Carter now joining us on the Rafters Music and Food Hotline. Keith, for a good bit of Saturday and Sunday, you and I were hanging out in the same location. You were going to be a little hot in the stands. It was pretty warm down there all over Hattiesburg. You were in the press box. You were in the radio booth. And I'm going to be honest, I walked over your shoulder on Sunday. You looked a little nervous. You were kind of jumping around. You were fidgeting. I heard at one point you were having to take your shoes off. You had a weekend, as I told you, tougher to watch than play, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, not even close. I've played in Rupp Arena and played in a lot of big places, and it was never as agonizing as some of those games over the weekend. But it's one of those where you invest so much time into it, and obviously the coaches and the players and the administration, and you get to that point, and man, we've knocked on the door so many times and just haven't been able to quite get there. We just all wanted it so bad, and man, kudos to the players and the coaches. They went down there and, not only won, but just, really played great baseball in all phases. Left no doubt, that we deserve to be in Omaha. And so, but yeah, I did feel bad. I did go out and visit a few of the fans and donors before game 2 for about 10 minutes. And I started sweating so bad. I was like, okay, back in the AC, let's go. But I'll say this, for the Rebel faithful that sat in those metal bleachers in 97-degree heat and humidity, man, thank you. Just thank you. It was awesome. And I know we all wanted to be there. But I did find my little nook in the back of the radio booth and the media room up there, which gave us a little bit of cool air.
Did you calm down prior to Elko catching the ball? Was it when Mallets got out of the eighth? When did you allow yourself to go, okay, we're probably all right here?
Well, I wanted 5 runs.
Okay.
We were up 3-0 for so long, and then I guess we get the 4th run, and then finally we got the 5th run, and I said, hey, we're at least out of the Grand Slam zone here, and so I thought once we got that 5th run, and like you said, Mallets got out of that jam, I guess they're in the 8th. We went down to the field at that point, and it felt really good at that point. But again, just a ton of credit to our team for battling and not giving up when they could have this year. And the other thing I wanted to mention too is just what a great job by Jeremy McLean and everybody at Southern Miss. They did a great job hosting the Super Regional, very hospitable. The fans were great. Scott Berry, class act. I went over and found him after the game and just told him how much I respected him and the program that he runs. And, really, if you think about it, it's pretty unfortunate the last 2 years that, we had to eliminate them, or they were going to have to eliminate us, because 2 great baseball teams. And really, last year they probably deserved to host. And this year, they could have easily gone to Omaha too. So just a great job hosting and a great season for Southern Miss.
So over the course, and you're exactly right, Scott Berry's one of those guys who deserves to go to the College World Series before he's done. You hope he finds a way to there at some point. It's obviously been a crazy season. From a decision standpoint, you're obviously going to wait to the end of every year, no matter what the sport is. You're just kind of watching, but you're a pretty hands-on guy, but you want to be careful and let people coach their programs. What do you sort of do? Like when they're 7-14, I mean, do you wonder sometimes if you need to give some words of encouragement, you need to be around, they want you to stay away from them? Are you taking notes on things that can help and hurt? What is sort of your mentality, whether it's going great or going poorly, over the course of that? What is kind of your role as an athletics director?
Yeah, well, I think first and foremost, it's an encourager. I mean, I'm never going to be the AD that's going to, walk in the clubhouse after the game or the locker room after the game and blow a coach up for a decision or this or that or whatever. I mean, they're around their team every day. They know what they're doing. Mm-hmm. And so I'm never going to be that guy. So to me, I try to take a role of just, hey, great win or great series, or, hey, tough series. Let's keep going, and, whatever, tough game. And so I try to do that. But, this was an interesting year because, all the great baseball we played early, you get to number 1, everybody's feeling good. You got Tennessee coming in and we're riding high. And then, that next month was about as bad as you can get, just for a lot of reasons. You lose Kevin, you're trying to figure out pitching, you're trying to, all those things. And I'm not blaming anybody, but it just didn't go well. And, I give a ton of credit to Coach B and Coach Clem and Laugh and Cleary, all those guys for, keeping our team focused, and our seniors too. I mean, Elko mm-hmm. and Graham and Bench and Brandon Johnson, all those guys, Chofie, that, they've been there before. They have the experience, they have that respect in the clubhouse, and just all of those parts put together. Man, they fought through it, got through some really tough times. And, you get to that Arkansas series where you don't win the series, but really you could have swept that series. You played pretty good baseball. And from there on, just, man, play great. And, we said it a million times, you want to be hot at the right time. And there's been some years where we've been hot and then couldn't get there this time of year. And, this year it flipped and we got to Omaha. So just couldn't be more happy.
4 SEC teams in, it's going to be, it's one thing. I mean, Mike talked about the logistical challenges of 36 hours, but when you're playing Auburn first, the scouting is much limited. You're not as worried about video and that kind of stuff. You can kind of focus on a lot of the other stuff prior to getting to the Tigers. Did you go over there for that series in March?
I didn't. I watched it, obviously, and then I watched, kind of their run. One of my best pals is the AD there, Alan Green. Sure. So, was texting with him during their series, and I don't know the analytics and all that stuff, but I know don't pitch to Sonny DeShera, right? Just don't pitch to him. I saw a stat in one of their games where he was 2 for 2, and the rest of the team was 1 for 27. So, even an old dumb basketball guy can say, hey, we're gonna put him on first, So, but yeah, it's so cool. I mean, people talk about the SEC this year and, hey, didn't have the front line arms or whatever it is. The SEC is a little bit down. Well, we get out of SEC play and get in the tournament and just dominate. It just shows you how good our league is. And then if you throw in Texas and Oklahoma, who will be there in a couple of years, you're looking at almost 6 out of the 8 that are SEC teams. So, we'll enjoy all this, but certainly when we, first pitch Saturday night, we'll be ready to compete against Auburn.
you said you're not a hands-on AD. You mean like on a Sunday, you don't walk into Lane's office and go, "Hey, if you try a little more cover 2 and you do a little more of this and that, and it'll fix all of it." That's not the move.
I'd love to see that reaction, right? He probably just slammed the door in my face, But no, I do like to be. I am hands on, but
Sure.
I'm never going to get in their business from a standpoint of technical or who you recruit or those type of things. I want to know that the programs are healthy. I want to know that things that the resources that they need are there and all those things. But like you said, if things aren't going well and we've given them the resources and it's just not working out, then at some point maybe you have to make a tough decision. But we're going to support these coaches and players, as much as we possibly can.
You alluded to it. You mentioned Texas, Oklahoma. Obviously, that was a good bit of talk in Destin. You were there a few weeks ago for SEC meetings. And we get the seating chart for the head coaches. We get all this stuff. It's all over the internet and off of social media. And I get you're in with the ADs, but what are these rooms actually like? I mean, y'all are basically just sitting around a table listening and maybe having an opinion here or there. But I mean, in general, what is sort of the atmosphere of these? I would assume a little more long and boring than most people. It's all like press boxes. Everybody goes, "Hey, I'd love to be in a press box covering a game." I'm like, we don't talk to each other. We're all completely boring and we're staring at our computer screens. It's not what you think it is.
Yeah, I almost got in trouble a couple of times this past weekend in the press box because I forget where I am and I want to cheer. Yeah. So I had to muffle that a little bit. But the AD rooms, and we do, 4 or 5 times a year, we get together as ADs and very cordial, very professional. We have great conversations. I respect every person in that room, and I hope they feel the same. So we accomplish a lot, solve a lot of problems. When these coaches get together, it's less frequent. And obviously, they have some opinions on things. They're a little more public with the things they say. And so we were all kind of anticipating some fireworks down in Destin, and there really weren't many. It was just kind of, they got in the room, and I know they talked a lot about NIL. I think the commissioner talked to the coaches about kind of that situation and what we should and what we shouldn't do and those type of things in the media. So I think they got it all figured out. And from everything I saw, there are times in between meetings when you're having lunch or you're doing different things where, coaches are sitting at tables together and doing those type of things. And I sure didn't notice any contentious, nature of anything. And so I think sometimes we forget that these coaches are in these high profile and high intensity situations all the time. They're liable to, bless out an assistant coach, and then 2 minutes later they're singing the same tune. They're used to this volatility and all that. And so, it got obviously pushed out in the media and all that. But I think, once it's all said and done, they're going to push forward and play football and keep going.
It felt like a little anticlimactic. I know you guys moved toward a lot of decisions, but it didn't really feel like a lot got concrete wise done. I mean, what was when you left, what did you feel like was accomplished or not accomplished? What's on the horizon? What are the 2 or 3 takeaways from that week?
Well, I took away that I sat in a conference room for about 35 hours in Destin and didn't get sunburned. That was good. But that's good. I agree. We didn't get a ton accomplished from the heavy hitting items. We got a lot done behind the scenes. Everybody wants to know the football schedule, but guess what? We had to do all the schedules for all the other teams too. So I mean, there's a lot of that stuff that happened. Some of those were a lot easier and obviously less high profile and those type of things. But people wanted to know the football schedule. They wanted to know, can we come out of this with an NIL solution? There's just a lot of things that are kind of heavy right now. But we did make a lot of progress on the scheduling. I think we're closer. We're getting toward the finish line. And I think we have meetings in Asheville in August. And I would think that probably by then we're going to be getting really close.
You don't need to give anything away necessarily. I won't put you on that kind of spot, but do you guys do straw polls and things? I mean, do you gauge where everybody's at in case you are at a place for a decision?
Yeah, we do. And again, I think that's the great part of our room is that, a lot of times somebody we'll be having a discussion and somebody say, "Hey, let's just do a straw poll. Let's see where everybody is." And, for us at Ole Miss, and I was talking with another reporter this morning that asked me about the 8 versus 9. And, for us right now, we're kind of an 8-game schedule. I think for us, where we are with the program, that would be where we vote. But again, I know that there's a lot of upside to going to 9 too. And I would be shocked if at some point we don't go to 9. Obviously a lot of things there with season tickets and better games on the schedule and those type of things. And I think for long-term, 9 makes a lot of sense, but right now, if we had to vote, we're probably sitting in the 8 vote.
You know, it feels like when the expansion goes from the playoff standpoint, it goes to 12. To me, that's when 9 definitely becomes more palatable, because I almost feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, I understand every coach more than an AD or more than anybody else is worried about that extra win, or, you know, it being 9 versus 8 or 10 versus 9. But when you go to 12 playoff teams, isn't it almost more like the NFL system a little bit, where who really cares if you win 9-7 or you're 10-6 or you're whatever you are, as long as you get in? And in some ways, I feel like once it goes to 12, it removes some of the sting in case there's that one fewer loss. We're so caught up in that in college football, because you look back and you go, hey, what did Freeze do? What did Nutt do? What did Hoover do? You go, well, he won 7, he won 8, he won 9. But those can look completely different. Aren't we kind of due for a little bit of a mentality change on that?
100%. You know, and I think that once we do that, once you get to 12, you know, you're going to be looking right now where the SEC, obviously we've gotten at least 1 in. This year we got 2 in. I think a couple of years we've gotten 2 in. But we're going to have 4 or 5 teams in the playoff. I mean, it's going to happen every single year because it's going to be that strong, especially when you add a Texas and an Oklahoma. So I think you're going to see, you know, 9 and 10 win teams likely in the playoff at times. And so I think that's where, again, you know, I think we're going to have to change the mentality. I think one of the things that's interesting about changing the schedules now, like if you just went cold turkey and said, we're going to 9 games, there's a lot of unwinding to do with games that are already on our schedules, you know, where there's buyouts, there's things that we have to work through. So, you know, there's some model where you could say, okay, we're going to stick with this for a few more years. Let these games be played so that you can work through these buyouts or not have to pay them. And then at some point we go to 9 in the future. But and honestly, that probably would correlate with when the playoff would change, you know. So I think we've gotten down the road. I think there's a lot of smart people in that room that are thinking about it, and we're going to come up with a really good solution.
So there was a question on our website earlier today, and it led into a podcast topic. We're recording this on Wednesday for anybody who's confused by the day here. And I went through this quickly. I could be wrong. Other than men's basketball, which I get is a huge sport and that needs to get better, you would agree with that in a lot of things. Otherwise, I think every sport made the NCAA tournament this academic year. I've been covering Ole Miss for, I guess, 17 years now, and I don't recall that in the past. I don't recall that level of kind of across the board. There's lots of reason for this. You and I talked about it. I mean, that's an SEC network thing all the way through. There's plenty of things, but when you step back and look at that, I know you've got a major one that needs to move, and you would rather that not be the anomaly. But at the same time, is there some departmental help and some nice things you take from that it looks like everybody's in pretty good standing, or at least on an upward trajectory?
Well, you missed one, if I'm not mistaken. Women's tennis didn't.
I forgot that. Okay, that's right. I did forget that.
And that's not.
I gave Mark a big benefit of the doubt. He's usually in, so I just went ahead and kind of skip past.
Normally, you just check that box. They're in, but and they'll get back there for sure. But you know, to your question, I think so. You know, I think we're in a good spot. You know, I think we got off to a great start in the fall. You know, all of our teams did really well there. When we finished the fall segment of the Learfield Cup rankings, we were ranked number 11 in the country, which, you know, we finished 22 last year, and that's the highest we've ever been ranked. Got off to a little bit of a slow start in the spring, obviously, and you mentioned men's basketball didn't make it, which, you know, we know they're going to get back there too. But with the finish with baseball, with the finish with men's golf, you know, some of these things, I think it's going to push us up there in the 20s again, and who knows, we might even be able to break that 22. So, you know, and that's our goal, Chase. You know, we want football to be really good, and we're going to put a ton of resources into that, and we know we have to because of the trickle down effect and how it affects our other sports. But we want all of our sports to be good, and we want them to have the resources they need to be good and have great coaches and all of that. But it's fun. It's fun when everybody's doing well in the postseason, and you know, it makes you feel good about what you do every day.
It's also worth mentioning, if I'm right here, the Learfield thing is a total point. So because you guys don't play a ton of sports, there's kind of a cap on how high you can get anyway, right?
Well, so I'm going to mess this up a little bit, but they count like the top 20 sports you have, or 18 sports that you have. I don't know. So if we're having to basically use every sport we have. And so if you're a Stanford and you have 36 sports, or Texas and you have 34 sports, you just pick your top 20 out of 34 and go with it. So there is a disadvantage there, but you know, it means that we were very efficient last year. Not only did we get in, we made runs, we made deep runs. Obviously, you win a national championship in women's golf. That's a lot of points. And so that helps. And so we're hoping baseball will get us one this year and get us a lot of points. But yeah, it's pretty cool when you can, you know, we'll never win that. We'll probably never be number one, But if you could ever get up in that top 15 or so, that would be a huge accomplishment for Ole Miss.
So you guys put out the release a couple weeks ago, I guess, about the stadium expansion being paused for plenty of reasons. I mean, everybody looks around to economy and bonds and different things from a pretty smart from a fiscal standpoint. But what is sort of is it just an indefinite wait? I mean, obviously the Manning Center is being completed. It's on schedule for next summer. Where are sort of the other projects that are inside this plan? And then what is sort of the time period where you would revisit when to move forward with the stadium?
Yeah, I think first with the stadium, I don't think we really have gotten that far along. We just knew that, hey, the right thing to do at this moment was to press pause. We had some great partners. Our architect, HOK out of Kansas City, are awesome. We look forward to picking right back up with them. We had an owner's rep named Chris Nations with Nations Group out of Scottsdale, Arizona. Fantastic. Obviously, our facilities planning department with Ian Banner and Virginia Pence, they've been really good. The chancellor, the CEO, everybody's been awesome through this process, but it was a decision we needed to make. And again, we're going to revisit that. You know, we got some time on that. I don't think it's a 12-month thing. It's probably 24 months or later before we would pick that up again. But what's good is we are continuing with the Manning Center. We're continuing with softball. Softball's right on schedule. We had some really good planning meetings on that last week. That's going to be a really great project. Soccer, golf, and baseball. So all of the other projects that we had in the Champions Now campaign, we're going to push forward on. We're just going to pull that stadium out because of the volume and just the overall, monetary amount involved in that one and bonding it out over 25 years. It just didn't make a lot of sense to push forward at the moment.
This combines a couple of those topics, that one, and then we were speaking about SEC meetings. Where do you see NIL moving? I mean, was there anything where you saw a roadmap to what that becomes? I mean, are we any closer today than we were 6 weeks ago?
No, I don't think we're a bit closer. We were at the Rebel Road Trip in Tupelo last night, and somebody asked a question about NIL, and myself, Coach Kiffin, Coach Davis, and Coach Yo were up on the panel, and they all handed me the microphone. So I had to talk about it, about NIL in front of everybody. So, I think at some point we will have a national guideline. We'll have an umbrella that we all have to work under and have some guardrails so that we're all kind of have the same playing field. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's happening in the next year, probably not in the next couple of years. And the hard part about that is if you just wait for that, you fall behind. And so right now you kind of got this wild west out there of, hey, can we do this? Should we do this? They're doing that, so we need to do that. But then you got enforcement sending out guidance from the NCAA every couple of weeks saying, hey, we're going to look into this. We're going to, whatever. But you got to be somewhat creative and proactive in it, because if you wait until this national standard, you're going to look up and have missed 2 or 3 recruiting classes, and you can't do that. So we're going to try to be as aggressive as we can to stay within the rules. But I think we've got a big roller coaster ride ahead with NIL.
So you don't have like Juice hanging out in your office or anything today? I mean, this dog is becoming somewhat of an official mascot, Keith.
Yeah, it is. Coach Kiffin loves Juice, and continuing to get legs for sure. So yeah, we'll see where Juice ends up in the pecking order of Ole Miss greats when this thing's all said and done.
He's incredibly well behaved, it appears, though. At least, like, you're not dealing with some wild maniac of a canine, at least.
Well, not to put a plug in, but he did get the dog from Wild Rose, so they do a pretty darn good job. They sell them all around the world. So. Probably pretty good bloodlines and pretty well trained.
So you're headed out on Saturday. Ole Miss playing Auburn 6:00 on Saturday night. Are you coming back on Sunday? You stayed up the whole time, back and forth? You gonna get a steak? What's the plan?
Yeah, we're packing a big bag, taking the whole family, and we're gonna hang out in Omaha. We're going to Omaha Prime on Friday night. Gonna start it off right, and for us, it's one of those deals. And if you're in administration, your family, they're just as much a part of it as we are. They think about it all the time. They hear about it on social media, all this. So we're going to go up there and enjoy the heck out of this and hopefully make a big run. There was a funny story in 2014, and I don't remember which donor was telling me, but we'd been up there about a week. I guess we won 2 and lost 2, if I remember right.
Right.
And so we'd been up there about a week, and somebody was coming down through the hotel to find the fitness center or something. And they went by the laundry area, and Ross was in there doing his laundry. And they're like, Ross, what are you doing? He's like, I had to do some laundry, man. I've been up here for 7 days and have any clothes to wear. So I may be down in the laundry room doing laundry about day 7.
All right. Well, safe trip. I appreciate the time, and let's talk after a couple weeks. We're up there.
Awesome. Thanks, Chase.
That was Chase Parham. Keith Carter, kind enough to give us some time this week before he heads out to Omaha. Again, the College World Series gets started on Friday. Got Texas A&M and Oklahoma, Texas and Notre Dame. That's the first day of games. Then Saturday's slate is a 1 p.m. game between Stanford and Arkansas, and then a 6 p.m. game, obviously, between Ole Miss and Auburn. I will be here for a post-game show after the Auburn game on Saturday. I'll take your calls. Chase will call in. We'll talk about the game a little bit. We'll see how that goes, how long it lasts, all that stuff. Anyway, more college baseball talk coming up now. Jeffrey Wright, 92.9 FM in ESPN in Memphis. He and I visited last evening for quite some time. We talked some college baseball. We talked some NBA, the NBA Finals, Game 6 tonight in Boston. Golden State can win the championship. Boston can force a 7th game. We talked about that. We talked about the future of the Memphis Grizzlies. Then we talked about the NBA Draft, which is 1 week from tonight. All eyes on Jabari Smith, Chet Holmgren, Paolo Banchero, Jaden Ivey, and those guys. A lot of NBA Draft talk at the tail end of this. I know people get angry when we talk NBA, so all the NBA is at the end. We didn't intersperse it before that. So when you hear me ask about NBA Finals, you'll know that's NBA talk the rest of the way. It's a little bit of college stuff at the very, very end, but first bit of this is about college baseball, about Ole Miss. Jeffrey's brother pitched at Ole Miss with under Mike Bianco, so we talked about what this means and that kind of thing. So here's Jeffrey Wright and myself on the Rafters Music and Food Hotline. My very good friend Jeffrey Wright, kind enough to join us here today on Hand Raised Guys. Jeffrey, how are you?
Neal, it's an honor and a privilege. I guess I'm done serving my suspension, right? Didn't we? I think the message board said that we had a falling out.
And I was
like,
did?
yeah, I was like, that's news to me.
That's news to me
still
as well.
Talk to him. I mean, we don't talk as much as we do during football season. I was like, I still talk to him multiple times a week. So I was like, I guess that maybe Chase is an imposter on one of the group chats that I'm on with him. So maybe that's his burner number.
Could be. Yeah. Well, good to have you off the suspension that I didn't know you were on.
Me either.
I want to get to some stuff. I mean, I've been itching to talk NBA draft with someone who is also knowledgeable about the NBA draft, because I have listened to so many NBA draft podcasts that it just all runs together. But we're gonna get to some other stuff first. I know you've been around the Ole Miss baseball program. You had a brother in it. Just your thoughts on Mike Bianco and Ole Miss getting through the tournament the way that they have, getting to Omaha and silencing all of the very legitimate at the time talk about Mike's job status.
So lots of thoughts come to mind. As you mentioned, I mean, I remember the day Mike was hired. John Schaefer, I believe, was the AD at the time. And, they sold Mike on the vision that, and they had to do it quietly, but the vision of, I don't know if you can win a national championship in football here. I don't know if you can win a national championship in basketball here, and here being Ole Miss. I do think you win a national championship in baseball here. And while they've never done it, they've been close. I mean, if Zach Cozart's ball in 2005 carries another 3 feet, that's a grand slam. They beat Texas. I think they would have had as good of a shot as anyone at winning a national champion. I know everyone likes to do you lost to the national champion in the super regional. I mean, there's matchups, you know what I mean? Like, who knows how it goes, but that team, certainly when you went and looked in the MLB draft, they certainly had players. And then obviously as you've pointed out, the Virginia series in 2014, whoever won that, I think it was a Thursday night game. I think we were at Buffalo Wild Wings watching it.
Yeah.
And then I think we were at Buffalo Wild Wings, and then you and I would do like a little wrap up podcast.
Yep.
I don't want to say that, yet again, just another example of innovating the game, but the post game analysis was all you're doing, as long as I could record it. So,
and now I've learned how to record it myself.
not only that, you've added video. I mean, I think you've actually surpassed me now, like in technological advances.
If I could just get rid of the bots, man, I'm cruising.
Yeah, I mean, listen, porn's always going to be there. You know what I mean? Like, there's one thing about it in a business where your product now goes out for free. You've got to advertise. So, you got to advertise any and everywhere. So they're getting the game out there. But, it felt like whoever won that first game was certainly going to win the bracket and then get to the championship series. And, you look at the last two super regionals. You go to Arkansas, and you lose game one. You came back and you win game two.
And that was an Arkansas team that everybody gets hung up on. I get it. That Arkansas team was really good, and that was an Arkansas team that the ball is in the air to go win the championship. If they catch the foul ball, they win the championship in 2 games.
Yeah.
And so my point is not about Arkansas. My point is that you lost a super regional on the road against a team that was absolutely capable of winning the national championship.
Yeah, and that's another example of a super regional. You lose to a title team. One of the super regionals, you go out to Arizona State, and that field was that was like one of the true home field advantages. That field was like a brick, and you go up against the team that was just like knocking the ball into the ground and bouncing it up, and you get beat there. I think the one that they absolutely kicked themselves over, and they should have won. I know everyone points to Virginia. I mean, listen, hey, the same situation we're talking about with Arkansas. There was a ball in play that could have essentially put Ole Miss, in the driver's seat to go to Omaha yet again. But, the Miami in 2006, you had the better team. I mean, I know when you look back at the Miami team, some of the names weren't known at the time, but you had them at home. Like that was one you should have gotten. But the thing that's really stands out to me this year is I think Mike somehow in the same season did one of his worst coaching jobs and then one of his best coaching jobs. Yeah. Because, one thing that I've always been critical of, and it's not really a big nitpick, but I think Mike has a tendency, particularly with his pitchers, he decides what you are, and it takes a lot for him to deviate. And, Derek Diamond to me is no different than like Cody Satterwhite. He has guys that he knows has good stuff, and he kind of falls in love with them, even though maybe the results show, hey, there's got to be a different role here. There's got to be something here. But I give him credit, maybe he was backed up to the wall and they had no choice and they had to change it up. But there are lots of coaches out there that aren't turning to kind of afterthought JUCO guy to be your Friday night guy.
Yeah.
And then there's lots of coaches that aren't turning to 88 mile an hour left-handed, 88 mile an hour fastball left-hander, true freshman that's been playing that was playing high school baseball. I don't know. Did they play sports in Mississippi last year? I don't.
Yeah.
So, a year ago, he's pitching on Friday night at Lafayette or Oxford High. I mean, that took guts to turn to those guys. And I weirdly think one of the interesting aspects of this year to me was because his set because that fell apart and he had to make adjustments. I oftentimes think Ole Miss pitching staffs in particular, I think they get worn down as the year goes on. And I think it's part of the reason why, in the end, the postseason struggles. I know oftentimes everyone talks about they get tight. Well, I mean, everybody's tight in a tight baseball game. You know what I mean? I think the bigger problem is that the guys are worn down on the mound. And you look at it, it's high volume, it's high innings. And this year, because of him making adjustments and essentially shaking up the whole staff, I think you got to the postseason, and as y'all pointed out, they had a very narrow path to victory.
Super narrow.
In the Miami Regional. I think it's probably also fair to say, having seen teams, I think all of them kind of had a narrow path.
Sure.
And it was going to be a matter of like who made more clutch plays, who got the clutch hit.
It was going to come down to who won that Miami Ole Miss game on that Saturday. On that Sunday. It was supposed to be a Saturday, but got moved to Sunday because of the weather. Whoever won that game was going to have a real commanding advantage the rest of the way.
And we saw it. Like in the end, we saw that, what happened on Monday happened. But the thing that I think that's the most interesting about this year is, let's take a look at the teams that made it from the SEC. It's Auburn, it's A&M, it's Arkansas, and it's Ole Miss.
Mm-hmm.
Ole Miss obviously was disappointing on the whole this year, from in the regular season.
Sure.
They obviously fought back and they deserve to be where they are. But overall, their season was disappointing. But if you look at the teams that are there, it's kind of the teams that had to scratch and claw. And they dealt with the grind that was this season. And in a year in which you really only had, maybe honestly nationally, you only had one great team.
For sure. That's it.
It really was a situation of getting the tournament. You know what I mean? Like, because I trusted Ole Miss in the end because they did have experience. I didn't really think the moment was going to be too big for these guys. And I think you started to see it as time went on. Like, they just needed to have some good things happen to them, get some momentum, and honestly, get out of league play. Because I think the biggest thing about the league this year was it was like 10 teams that were all kind of the same. Like,
yeah,
you know what I mean? Like,
I made the mistake, Jeffrey, of thinking it was a bunch of mediocre teams, and I was wrong. And I've admitted that I was wrong. It was actually a bunch of good teams that weren't able to get great, and they just beat the hell out of each other. And it kind of came down to kind of who was healthy and who was whatever. And like, you'd watch, like, thinking about the teams that are still in it, right? You watched Auburn, and Auburn couldn't quite get to that great level. Like, you're like, man, this is a weekend where they could get all three and they'd only get one or two. And they just couldn't quite get there, but you'd watch them and like, but they're good. They don't go away. A&M got hot and stayed hot and built. Arkansas, at one point, it looked like they were on pace to win 20, 21 SEC games. And then they just got into a slog and they had some dead arms and yet, here they are. So I don't know. I mean, and look, Vanderbilt damn near got there, and LSU damn near got to the super regional round. And it turns out the league, I was wrong. I was bad wrong. The league was a lot better than I thought it was. But what it didn't have, it just didn't have but that one team that every single weekend, there was only one team the whole year that could just walk into your stadium and just kick your ass without you having much you could do about it. And that was Tennessee. And you see what happened with them. So I mean, it's the unpredictability of sports.
Well, so I want to kind of go back to, I don't necessarily think that you were wrong on the sense of mediocre teams if the standard is what we've kind of come to know as college baseball.
And I've watched SEC baseball for 20-something years. They just kind of looked mediocre. I kept waiting for teams to show this like bounce and this edge, and they weren't. Like Arkansas wasn't as good this year as they were last year. LSU wasn't as good this year as it was last year. Vanderbilt took this, from a win-loss standpoint, this big step back, and yet you'd watch them and you're like, man, there's real talent there. Like, I love the Bradfield kid. God, he's great. And you kept waiting, like Florida, you kept going, man, there's just so much talent. They're going to take off, and they didn't. And Ole Miss, you would like, hey, this team was number one in the country, and here they are. They're losing to South Carolina, and they're losing to Mississippi State, and they're losing these games. And at some point you go, maybe they're not good. Maybe they're just mediocre. I mean, I was wrong, but it's not like one of those people like, oh, you were really wrong. I'm like, oh, come on. You do this for a living. You're going to miss stuff. I mean, they just teams other than Tennessee, nobody ever, nobody ever established itself as no, we're here, we're dominant. Like Georgia had a little run where Georgia was good for a while, and then they kind of fell off. The Cannon kid got hurt, and they kind of fell off. And the one thing I will say about the league that I think skewed it a little. Mississippi State lost a couple of starters.
Frontline arms. To me, the biggest difference this year was frontline arms.
Yeah, Arkansas lost Paulette. LSU lost a frontline starter. I mean, you see that happen. Derek Diamond's not himself. I mean, it's obvious that Derek's pitching through some form of an injury. And so you see these things, and you're like, well, that's part of it. And yet, it's a credit. Like you said, it's a credit to Mike. It's a credit to Butch Thompson. Schlossnagel's a terrific coach, obviously, the way he can establish a culture so quickly at Texas A&M. And, I think this is one of Dave Van Horn's best coaching jobs because that team was left for dead 3 or 4 weeks ago.
Well, so this is kind of what's interesting to me. So Notre Dame, 16-11 ACC. Oklahoma, 15-9 in the Big 12. A&M, 19-11. Like you said, they got hot, stayed hot. Texas, 14-10. In the Big 12.
Yeah.
Stanford did what the good teams in the Pac-12 are supposed to do. You got to feast on the bottom, 21-9. Arkansas, 18-12. Ole Miss, 14-16. Auburn, 16-13. We're not talking about teams, for the most part, with these gaudy records. And so what I found interesting about last week was I think there was something to be said for the teams that had to grind it out, because in the end, and I know this was something I think you had mentioned on maybe the post game show after the regional. I want to see what Tennessee gets like, what they look like when they get tight.
Yeah.
And I thought there was a couple of interesting moments in that series. The first interesting moment was it Baker? Who was the kid that got tossed on a strike one call at the knees?
Gilbert.
And he throws his hissy fit, and then you had the Big Orange Mafia coming out. It's like, man, that was strike one.
Yeah. You're tight as a drum, and it showed.
And I know we're not supposed to use the C word, and it doesn't rhyme with bunt. But Neal, 6 of those runs in game 3 came with 2 outs.
Yeah.
And, I don't fault them for leaving the starter in after the single, but it's like, after he gave up the homer, it's like, what are you doing? Like, you gotta go get him. And I thought they approached the game like they didn't treat it like it was do or die. And I think these teams that are still in it, it's been do or die for them for a long time. And
it's what I love about Ole Miss's chances in this is they've been playing these do or die games since the first Missouri game.
And furthermore, might be the healthiest they've been this year.
Could be.
And they've added an extra, at least one legitimate arm in the bullpen. And I think now they probably have more that they trust in the bullpen. And here they go. And, would I pick them to win it? I mean, is it Ole Miss versus the field? Okay, well, give me the field.
But, sure.
Like, who would you say is the unquestioned favorite? Because I've watched Stanford. Like, I don't sit there and go, that's not a team that Ole Miss.
Yeah, Chase and I disagreed about that the other day. And look, he knows a lot of college baseball, obviously, but Stanford's good. They're really good, but like they haven't pitched it all that great here lately. And it's a big park. Arkansas is a good defensive team. Arkansas's infield defense is elite. I don't know. Here's what I expect. And
now here's the one weird thing, and I know you probably can't do it, and maybe this is the smartest guy in the room thing, but one thing I can tell you about West Coast baseball, every single team, I don't care if it's Pepperdine, I don't care if it's Stanford, I don't care if it's Oregon State, I don't care if it's Cal State Fullerton, every single one of these teams has at least 2 lefties that throw 88 and look just like Elliott. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I would flirt with maybe tossing him against Auburn. And then one thing that, it's not a power arm with a slider, and maybe you throw DeLucia against Stanford, but I also acknowledge that might be a little smartest man in the room. But
yeah, I think you got to dance with the girl that brought you, and
then maybe, what if Arkansas beats Stanford? I mean, that, that's a problem for another day. But I mean,
what I was saying is I fully expect Ole Miss and Arkansas to both win on Saturday, and maybe they'll both lose, and I'm dead wrong. I expect them both to win, and whoever wins that game on Monday night, I love their chances to get to the final. And then on that other side, I mean, why everyone is counting out Texas A&M is beyond me. We've been doing this for a while now, and they just go win games. And Oklahoma's hot, and I like hot teams in Omaha, and they're kind of there.
The only thing that concerns me about Oklahoma a little bit is they feel very home run dependent.
Yeah, and that's a hard place to go win on a bunch of
you know what I mean? Like it, but it doesn't mean if it ball's hard, you can't still get it in the gap. You know what I mean? Like maybe that ball that goes out, like, it's a big park, and
there's just no one team. There's no one team because Tennessee's out. And once Tennessee got out, and even to some extent Oregon State got out, because Oregon State could have gotten into this thing with the one starter who could just go take you, like that cat's good. And now that those teams are out, I mean, if you offered me any team versus the field, I would go field.
Yeah, I think that's fair. But at the same time, if you're Ole Miss, isn't that the type of College World Series you want to be in?
Absolutely. I mean, you couldn't ask for a better draw. Now, look, Ole Miss could lose to Auburn and turn around and lose to Arkansas or Stanford on Monday and be out. No question. And the same could happen. Auburn could lose twice in a row. Arkansas could lose twice in a row. Stanford could lose twice in a row. There's no doubt about that. I mean, but yeah, if you're Ole Miss, you look at this and you go, there's nothing in this that we can't handle. You can lose to those teams, and they've already lost to Auburn once this year. They've lost to Arkansas twice this year. They can lose to those teams, But yeah, no,
I think the other thing
as good a draw as you could have asked for at the College World Series.
I think the other thing that's interesting to me is that, you've been around it now since 2008. Is that right?
Ole Miss, yeah.
Yeah. I've been around it my entire life. Isn't it funny that, like, you and I, who in the end, like, yeah, we have connections, but it's not like you and I aren't sitting here living and dying. I mean, I got my wife who can't even watch when it was like 10-0. Like it was 10-0, and didn't Southern get a hit like in the 8th or the 7th or something? He's like, see, this is when they blow it. And I'm just like,
I quit watching in the 8th inning.
I was like, sweetheart, like you and I are not watching the same thing. But, when I saw that draw in Miami, and I looked at her, I go, listen, I'm not getting your hopes up, but I go, there's no reason. There's no reason that they can't go and win that. Yeah. And it's also really funny that both of us felt pretty good about Ole Miss going down to Hattiesburg.
Oh, sure. And they could have had a much worse draw. They could have gotten sent to Austin or Corvallis or Stillwater, or a lot of places that would have been a much more difficult draw than Coral Gables, and then on their way to Southern Miss. And look, LSU could have won, and you would have had your hands full in Baton Rouge, because it's a totally different thing.
Like, to me, you and I saw it the same way. Like, in the end, how many guys does Southern? I don't know. What was the story on the Friday night guy? He has the 2 last names. Like, he should pitch for Georgia. Actually, he should play golf for Georgia. But I mean, how many guys on Southern's roster did Ole Miss? You know what I mean? Like, if they weren't, they could have had.
It's my thing. Who do you want to play in a super regional, an SEC team or a Conference USA team?
Well, Neal, I got some knowledge for you. How many super regionals has Mike Bianco's Ole Miss program lost against non-Power 5 teams?
0.
How many super regionals have they won against Power 5 teams?
0. Yeah.
But I'd rather have gone to Baton Rouge and tried to have won 5 out of 6 in Baton Rouge, or would I have rather gone and I mean, there's also something to be said, like, you
when
you go to the, I know as a sports fan, you can't pick it like this because you don't know how the game's going to go. I still contend as a sports fan, the single best feeling is going on the road and watching your team win and then hearing there's that unbelievable silence of when, you know what I mean? Like you just rip their hearts out. That's amazing. Obviously, we don't know the results of the game before we go. So, like, that makes it difficult. But, like, that's a pretty awesome feeling in sports.
Yeah, Chase was talking about how he had talked to Hunter Elliott going into the Super Regional, and people were asking about how, Southern Miss, Pete Taylor Park was going to be so intimidating and stuff. And he was like, he was trying to be respectful, but he's like, come on. I mean,
Remember this Lafayette thing. Like people are
he was like 2 months ago, I pitched in Fayetteville. I gave up a home run and they're calling the Hogs and I got to get the ball back. And there's 14,000 people or 13,000 or whatever it is that they hold there. I mean, if that's not going to intimidate you, well, then Pete Taylor Park's not going to intimidate you either because someone calls you a bad name. I mean, who cares?
Yeah. And like, for the record, I thought it was a great environment. Like that outfield looked cool. I mean, yeah, it's always fun. I don't care how big the stadium is. When you see shoulder to shoulder and not an empty seat, like that's a cool thing to see in sports. Like it's amazing. But it just reminded me of when I was in college, Georgia went to play like Oklahoma State, and all these Oklahoma State beat writers are asking Georgia, like, what's it going to be like to play in this environment at T-Boone Pickens Stadium? Like, I don't know. Like, I played at Neal, there's 105,000 there. I played at Alabama, there's 95,000 there. I played at LSU.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they don't play the Swamp, because that's games in Jacksonville, but it's like, imagine adding 30,000 more people and, so, to like the whole kind of big picture question right now, like about Mike and what it says, I think it's kind of a testament to his career. Mm-hmm. And that weirdly to me, and maybe it's because of how he played, undersized catcher, at an elite program, but, had to go to JUCO first. He's just way better when he's fighting for his life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like when he's the underdog and he's chasing. And I think that's interesting because it's kind of hard to be a good front runner. And he's had really good teams. And, one thing I know that you and I always talked about, this idea that Ole Miss was going to upgrade, it's entirely possible.
Sure.
I mean, to sit there and go that he's the only human being in this sport that can do this job, like that to me seems illogical. But at the same time, as Tennessee, like, yeah, when Delmonico was, throwing fisticuffs with his players, like, yeah, he had to go. But Tennessee was in the wilderness for a really, really long time. Like Georgia baseball has been in the wilderness for a decently long time. I mean, Alabama's problems are probably more institutional. I mean, you know what I mean? Like at a time when their football program was bad and Jim Wells was a good coach, like they kind of had it going, but at the same time, everyone else started caring about it and therefore the job got hard. But this idea that the program was just going to sell itself is, I don't know how you can make that statement definitively. And I think in the end, I always thought that, he's built this thing from the ground up. And, it's not a perfect machine. It's a pretty good one, though.
It's really good. I mean, you go back and look at the last 7 years now. Go back to just 2014 and
well, and the other funny thing is, I feel like the conversation entering 14, and maybe I've got the years wrong, but I thought the conversation entering 14 was kind of the same thing. Like,
it was kind of how you have to get there. And then
and first off, Omaha or bust is kind of a weird metric, but whatever.
It is.
The same, but the point still stands for me, like back against the wall. And that team was more consistent, obviously, but That team also had a more established pitching rotation. I mean, Chris Ellis, major league pitcher. I'm pretty sure, right? I think Chris pitched in the majors. And then you got the transfer from LSU's name escapes me, a little left-handed.
Trent,
yeah, and Christian Trent. And, you had a pretty solid bullpen, but so that team was a little more consistent throughout the year. But, if you look at from the time that they've turned to DeLucia on Friday and they've turned to Elliott on Saturday, those teams look a lot alike. They really do. Both those teams, man, they swing it. And yeah, their defense isn't perfect, but they've gotten, I think bench back to third helps them. And they've started to figure out, they've started to figure out a better outfield rotation. I mean, I don't see a Braxton Lee out there, but I mean, overall, those teams kind of really mirror each other a lot to me.
Yeah, a lot of similarities. Any scenario where Boston comes back and wins the series against Golden State?
Well, I mean, to me, like, it's pretty simple. Like, do they take care of the basketball? And, we were looking at it. The thing that's frustrating to me, obviously I'm bleeding green, lifelong Celtics fan, bleed green. And the thing that's maddening about them is, other than game 2, I felt like their losses, they blew them.
I did too.
And,
especially game 4. God, it was just brutal to watch them give away.
Well, I mean, how do you go 5 minutes without? And for the record, like, Steph was incredible. Like,
he was.
I've never seen 40 that felt like 80. Like, you know what I mean? Like, because it wasn't just 43 points. It was 43 points and nobody else was scoring. And so, there is that side of it. But, you go the last 5 minutes, and in the last 5, I think they went 1 from 8 from the field, 1 from 7 for 3, and they finished with 3 points. Like, and the other thing that's really maddening about them, it would be one thing to me if I thought a lot of these turnovers were Golden State forcing, making plays, active hands, whatnot. So many of these turnovers are just like them just, tossing it up the floor to no one. Jaylen Brown, how many times has Jaylen Brown just like dribbled out of bounds? Like, he kind of gets caught in a corner in a trap and he just dribbles it out of bounds. And you're sitting there going like, these are just stupid turnovers. These are just completely unforced turnovers. It does feel like to me when Boston not even like plays its best, but just plays within itself, they're better. But the reason why Golden State's up 3-2 is that Golden State, I think, has, while I don't think they're as good, I think that they have found longer periods in which they've played better basketball. And it's simple with Boston. In their 2 wins, they basically turned it over 12 times. And more importantly, they got about 8 more shots in those 2 games. Well, it's pretty easy. Like, okay, they're turning it over 8 more times in the losses. Guess what? They get 8 fewer shots. And more importantly, it's 8 more shots for Golden State. Like, it's just wasted possession. So, if you told me they come back and win in game 6 and then it's on to game 7, I haven't seen anything from Golden State that says like, oh man, you can't win there. Like, we've already seen Boston do it. The Grizzlies should have done it twice.
Yep.
But they started throwing it around and then they didn't have Ja Morant to close it out. Like, that's a big problem. But there's a certain point in which Boston has played with fire. It feels like in the Milwaukee series, in the Miami series, and now. And you just wonder, can you just give away games and then keep coming back and winning in 7? Like, at a certain point, do you reach a series where that comes back to bite you? And I think the other thing that's a little concerning to me as a lifelong Celtics fan is that, for the most part, I guess you can kind of make the argument game 5, but they haven't played with the pressure on them. You know what I mean? Like game 1, it's house money and you steal game 1. Game 2 became a free shot, and their effort in the second half was whatever. You got the split.
Sure.
Game 3, I guess you can kind of make an argument. Maybe the pressure was on them, but it now officially, you go at home, and
you need Jason Tatum to step up and be a star, and you need Jason Tatum has to outplay Andrew Wiggins. I mean, that's as simple as that. Tatum has to give you more than Wiggins is giving the Warriors, or this thing's over.
Well, and the funny thing about Wiggins is, for all the talk about Draymond, oh my God, the guy that's really beating Boston at their own game right now is Wiggins. Wiggins is the guy that has been
Draymond. Yeah, exactly.
Wiggins has been the guy. I mean, how many times has Wiggins come up with like a tough rebound and a putback, and you leave going, man, I thought that guy was kind of soft. Like, you know what I mean? Like, he's been an animal. And
as much as I hate to give them credit, give the Warriors credit. The Warriors are getting something out of him that nobody else could.
And, Clay is giving them enough.
Yeah.
It's the ghost of Clay.
Yeah.
And so far, Steph has been awesome in 4 or 5 games. And, to me, it does also feel like Boston kind of goes as Robert Williams goes in terms of how he looks.
Yeah.
Like the 2 games they won, I thought, man, he looks pretty good. And then the other 3 games, you feel like he's kind of limping around. And, it's the risk of when you have that surgery and you do the shave and you don't do the repair and the meniscus tear, like, and it's obviously been banged up at times, but Horford has looked inconsistent. But I mean, I guess really for me, I think you're right in the sense that I don't know if it's that Tatum has to play like a superstar, but Tatum and Brown both have to at least be good. And
they got to be really good.
And, we just haven't seen it enough, but I don't know. It's a weird series. I'm just still left. Like, I have thought all series long, Boston was better, but at the same time, like, hey man, scoreboard.
You mentioned Memphis. Obviously the Grizzlies are close. How close? I don't know. Close. They're right there. They could have won that series, and had they won that series, maybe they're in the NBA Finals right now. What do you expect from the Grizzlies this offseason to try to get that last rung on the ladder?
So they're in a interesting spot from this perspective. They have draft capital, but they don't have, other than the Warriors' unprotected pick in 24, they don't have a lot of like, oh my God, like that's going to be like, they have a lot of capital, but I don't expect them to be in the lottery very much the next few years. So the other complicating factor for them is, okay, they can make deals, but there's the emergence of Desmond Bane in particular. There's the thought of, well, maybe that was your third guy. And instead of having to go and get your third guy, maybe that's him. And so you've now created this situation in which, Jaren has proven, in the end, like Jaren's going to be maddening to fans at times, but he, the opportunity cost is too great. Like you're committed to him.
He's a championship caliber player.
And now Bane has kind of entered into that core of, okay, they're not available.
Yep.
So that leaves you with Dylan Brooks on an expiring deal, Steven Adams on an expiring deal. I think Melton has 2 years left. Like it's kind of your bit pieces, and then 22 and 29 in the draft. There's not much you can do. I'm also in the boat of the Grizzlies have this weird reality that they are very good, very young, and most of their core is like within 2 years of contracts. So I kind of think what they would be best served doing, and it's just one man's opinion. Also, I should point out, I don't know all the deals that are out there. You know what I mean? Like what is or isn't out there. But I think there's something to be said. They should start working on trading draft picks for future draft picks, future first. And, you know, maybe pick off a team like Atlanta, maybe a team like Chicago. I know Detroit is feeling excited about what they're building, but, you know, if Detroit wants to give me a future first that's lightly protected, I know one thing I'm willing to bet on, Detroit bring it out. Like, you know what I mean? Like that seems to be a fairly safe bet. And so therefore, when you know you're going to have to pay Ja, Jaren, presumably Bane at the minimum, you now have these first rounders, possibly higher first rounders, that you can kind of fill out the rest of your rotation with. Because one thing that always gets left out of the Golden State conversation in the beginning is that they got Steph on, what was it, 4 years, 48 because of the ankles.
Yeah, that's what ultimately freed them up to be able to have the money to go get Durant.
And the Grizzlies are just not going to be in that position. And so I think there's something to be said for that. I mean, I know some people are talking about the Kings maybe making 4 available. The other problem that I see with the Grizzlies is the Grizzlies feel like the team that you might be able to get involved to set the price. And then I think other teams are going to be able to beat what they offer, because I don't think the Grizzlies are going to offer Ja, Desmond, or Jaren. And then you have this weird reality of, you know, Tyus Jones is a, you know, he's a free agent, but the sign and trade candidate, or maybe, you know, do you throw more money at him to try and bring him back? Because I do think the backup point guard role has to be important for the Grizzlies, because I'm not sure you can count on Ja, nor do I think you should maybe play Ja, you know, 75 games a year. I mean, in the end, like a
couple of guys in the draft, where are they? 21 and 29. Is that where Memphis is?
Yeah. So the first
There's
thought is
Ty Washington. There's Kennedy Chandler.
but that's the other problem. I mean, I will believe it when I see it that they turn to their backup point guard as a rookie.
Yeah. Yeah. But you might.
And I mean, to me,
have to.
I mean, again, like, hey, welcome to the real world problems. Like, it's also one of those interesting things that, like, I think back to, you know, how many years I've spent like watching the draft and whatnot. And it's like now, you know, partially for my job, it's like we're spending more time. Like, we do a segment on the radio show. It's a Grizzlies trade per day. And it you know, that takes over more conversation than the draft, because, you know, if you hit it 22 or 29, great. And the Grizzlies have had some late first round success, but, you know, like, that's not really moving the needle. But the thing that you realize when we do this exercise is, man, there's not really a lot out there for them to do except be better than you were this year. And I actually think that it's possible. And the reason why I believe that it's possible, in the end, I think Dylan Brooks' struggles, and he's a lightning rod for the fans because he's such an inefficient scorer. He was hurt. I mean, he had a high ankle sprain most of the season. He had a knee earlier. I think it's entirely reasonable to think he will be better next year if he's healthy. And so all of a sudden, it's like, okay, if you can improve the Grizzlies, what would you do? Well, you got to improve the wing. I think that could be the improvement. But to me, the larger question is the NBA, is it going to resemble what we've seen the last couple of years, where, much like we've been talking about in college baseball, like there's no Death Star team. There's no team that you go, okay, they can't handle it. But at the same time, I mean, you know, I feel like we're always just one hissy fit away from someone putting together a super team.
So let's talk about the draft a little bit, because I'm curious. We talked about Memphis at 21 and 29. Obviously, the attention a week
22 and 29. Sorry,
22 and 29. The attention next week's going to be on the top of the draft, as it always
Sure.
is. Orlando's number 1, Oklahoma City's number 2, Houston's 3rd, Sacramento, which is the weirdest organization in maybe all of professional sports. They're completely unpredictable. No one knows what the hell they're going to do. They're at 4. Detroit's at 5. I mean, there's some players in this draft. I'm not convinced there's superstar players in this draft, but I think there are some really impactful players in this draft. And now there's this buzz that for about 5 weeks, it was, hey, Orlando is going to take Jabari Smith. And now there's the betting lines on that have completely changed. It's probably Orlando's going to take Jabari Smith, but they might take Chet Holmgren. And then there's this talk about what Sacramento might do. Sacramento might trade out at 4. There's rumors today that a number of teams, the Thunder included, might try to trade up to 4 and move pieces now to go get 2 impact players for their roster. I guess we'll start here. What do you think Orlando does at 1?
I think most times the obvious choice ends up being the right choice. And one thing that's really also upset me about this draft, we got to get these basketball people out of the front office. Get me some football guys in the front office. We have 8 days until the draft, and I haven't heard one smoke signal. Like, I haven't heard one smoke screen. I need some guys to get up there and just start lying to media and start saying, who's really going to go number 1? Ivy. And you know why? Point guard. Look at every guy that's changed. The franchise. It's been a point. Give me something. Like, this is too boring. Like, give me some smoke screen.
Everyone's doing this thing about the Thunder trading up to get Jared Ivey. And for the record, I love Ivy, but where the hell does Ivy fit on a team that already has Josh Giddey and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander? I mean, you're going to have 3 primary ball handlers?
I mean, I guess the argument would be, if you think he's going to be a good player, take him.
Sure.
And then you can figure out, maybe you move him, but I think that's the thing. It's like, if you have someone that you believe is going to be a good player, you take him. And I understand that logic, even if it's like, maybe it's not a great fit, because in the end, it's not about next year for the Thunder. So give yourself as many opportunities to figure out what the right fit is. The thing with me and Jabari Smith is, I don't know if he ends up being this, but there are times that I've watched him play and I go, man, that smells like Kevin Durant. You know what I mean? Like, pretty shot. I mean, I know his shot's prettier than Durant's, but Durant's shot's maybe more unblockable because of that high release point and whatnot.
Is he big enough to play the 5 in a small ball lineup in a playoff series?
Well, hell, I mean, Golden State's 5 is 6'5" half the time. And you know what I mean? Like, and in the end, like, when we start looking at these, these teams in playoffs, like, okay, does someone really want to trade for Gobert? Like, it's the same problem with Gobert that every big is. Like, he's a great player. And in the regular season, like, he's dynamite. But
Steven Adams with Memphis, he was a critical part of the regular season, and then he just couldn't play in the playoffs.
They also gave up on him. And that was, if I had one criticism of the Grizzlies during the playoffs, they panicked on that, because Towns, Jaren kept getting in foul trouble, and Towns was, I don't think their approach was right. They were playing him too far from the basket, and it led, but they also panicked. They got to the point where they literally thought Xavier Tillman was the right answer. And it's like, oh my God, people. But with Smith, we know he can play on the wing, or at least I think he can develop into a wing player. We've seen enough of it.
For sure.
He's got guard skills.
His floor is a tall Paul George.
And I think where you and I are going to disagree the most is on Holmgren.
I think
and with Holmgren, I do think high floor, because in the end, he's always going to be a rim protector, and he's going to have value on the defensive end. My problem with Holmgren is, every time this year Gonzaga got up against an athletic team, it was bad news bears. It was, when they'd started spacing him out, and he played in this Iverson Classic and he got rave reviews because he shut down Paolo. Everyone's talking about his defense, and I'm sitting there going, are we sure about Paolo? Because maybe Paolo is soft.
He could be. I don't want the Thunder at 2 to end up with anyone not named Chet or Jabari.
And I think I guess that's kind of the other problem that I have, though. It's like, for what we just talked about with Adams, with Gobert, late stage Marc Gasol, like, what is the value of an NBA center?
But Chet's got handled, though. I mean, his worst case offensively because I think he's going
I
to.
also need to know. I also would need to know in the draft process. Obviously, this wouldn't be for public consumption. How open are you to the idea of steroids?
I mean, from all indications for both he and Jabari, work ethic is simply not an issue. They'll both do whatever it takes. Chet's floor, Holmgren's floor as an offensive player is a floor spacer who can make threes from the perimeter. He's got a great shot. His ceiling is, because he's not a great passer, his ceiling is a guy who can make that shot, who can also, he's so tall, so big with the, 2 dribbles, great handle both ways, that he can be a real force offensively. His value is as the anchor on your defense. He's an elite rim protector, and he's so active and stuff defensively. But see, I think the Jabari comp is Kawhi. It's Paul George. It's offensively. I don't know that he'll ever be Kevin Durant, because I don't think he can create like Durant can.
No, and I mean Durant is like, that's what I've said. Like, it's not Durant, nor do I even think like that's ceiling. But it's just like there are moments where you just sit there and you look at him and like how he shoots over people and whatnot. It's like, God, that to be his size and feel like he's a guard. Like, I don't know. Like, there's just you can kind of, you know what I mean? You got to squint a little bit, but I was like, yeah, man, that reminds me of that.
What's interesting is, like, if Sacramento does something stupid and Ivy falls to Detroit, I mean, my God, Detroit goes, wait a minute, we have Cade Cunningham and Ivy?
Well, and also that could impact one of the landing spots for Tyus Jones in a potential sign and trade is Detroit. And if I'm Detroit, I'm wanting Ivy to play. Like, I'm a believer of get your reps, man.
Oh yeah. You want him to play. Get your lumps, get your reps. We're going to figure this out, because it's an easy comp to make because of all the ties, and they wear their hair the same way and stuff. He's the next Ja Morant. He's probably not Ja Morant, but he's going to be an elite offensive player in the NBA.
Yeah, and I mean, so for those that don't know, his mom, Neal Ivey, is now the head women's coach at Notre Dame. She was on the Grizzlies staff and basically like
worked with Ja.
And like, because Jaden and Ja and Jaren, they're all kind of like roughly the same age. So, but she was very close with both of them. But I mean, he's super athletic and he can score. I don't know. Like, to me, there's also in the back of my mind, like, Hollinger can get a little too nerdy for me at times. John Hollinger. It's kind of damning when you look at front court players taken in the top 10 versus guards taken in the top 10 or wings taken in the top 10. It's like, maybe if you got 2 guys rated similarly, like I am with you, I do think there's a clear gap between Jabari and then the rest. I almost think you're better off taking if you have any faith in any of these, any of these perimeter players, I think you might be better off taking them after those 2.
Yeah, I mean, there's some wings that I really like. I mean, I had hoped for a long time that Dyson Daniels would fall to 12. He's not going to fall to 12. I had hoped for a long time that Benedict Mathurin would fall to 12. He's not going to fall to 12. I like Jeremy Sohan. And then there's the wild card is Shaedon Sharpe. Like, who knows who Shaedon Sharpe is?
Well, here's what we do know. For all of the discussion about, wanting to play this year, that man beat John Calipari at his own game.
Oh, he did.
That man got himself what was it? Was it Norman Hand? Was it Norman Hand that said his time in Oxford was the best 6-month vacation he ever had? I'm pretty sure that's the one. Like, Shaedon Sharpe had a well-paid vacation in Lexington, didn't get hurt, whatnot. I don't know. I mean,
he's the guy that has the lowest floor and the highest ceiling.
And that, that speaks to me.
I know.
That speaks to me.
I know. So it's
like the same thing with Jonathan Kuminga. Why did I love Kuminga last year? A, he had red flags. B, it was, high floor, or low floor, high ceiling. It's like, I'd rather take my shot on that. Like, the odds of these guys actually turning out to be something are not great to begin with, even at the top of the draft.
So swing
So
hard. That's why, I mean, there's this talk about, I know we're talking about the Thunder for a minute. You've got to forgive me. That's who I'm focused on in the draft. There's this talk about him falling to 12. And I'm like, oh, for the love of God, if he does fall to 12, just send the card up. Because when people do, like, what's his ceiling? And someone goes, well, I mean, his ceiling's kind of Kobe. And you're like, wait, what? And they're like, but understand now, his floor is total disaster. His floor is,
you said Kobe, right?
yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to go do that.
Yeah, but I'm like, wait, so there's in a world where he's Kobe, and you're like, well, maybe okay, I'm in, because some of those other guys, like, what's his ceiling? Well, his ceiling is a very productive player.
Yeah,
what's his floor? Well, his floor is that he's just a role player. Okay, so take me back to the other one. His floor is an absolute disaster.
Yeah.
What's his ceiling? Oh, his ceiling is all league. Sign me up.
Okay,
and
so
you're a young team and you're not trying to win. Like, this is why, like, in my ideal world for the Thunder, and I know nobody cares. If you're still listening at this point, you're in. In my ideal world for the Thunder, frankly, it's Chet and Shaden Sharp. 2 reasons. One, both guys have huge upsides, but both guys are going to be awful rookies.
Yeah, no, so that helps the cause. That helps the cause next year.
And so you lose organically next year, and you have all these different picks next year, and maybe
Neal,
you win the lottery.
Neal, we're building chemistry.
Well, last year the Thunder tanked. I think this year coming up, they have to be careful, because if you tank again, start really messing with your.
We're building chemistry.
Right. I mean,
we don't tell these stories. We tell our story.
I think you have to be careful, though, in all seriousness, with young players. I think you can do it for a.
I definitely think you don't want to build you don't want to build a culture in which winning isn't valued.
Where winning is discouraged.
Correct.
Where losing is that's, you got to be careful there. And this year, the Thunder did what they had to do. They knew there were 3 players at the top of the draft, maybe 4, and they had to go get one of those guys. And it worked out. But, next season, I think if you're going to lose, it's got to be a little more organic. It can't be, hey, we have 5 guys, none of whom are NBA players, and they're going to play 48 minutes against the Lakers on the final night of the season. I don't think you can do that next season without it beginning to impact what happens inside your building.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
So that's what I'm hoping for. I'm hoping that they draft a couple of guys with tremendous upsides who are going to play a ton and be awful as rookies, and young players, young teams lose games. And then maybe you next year's draft is loaded. Of course, everybody talks about Wembanyama, but there's more to that draft than just Wembanyama. And if maybe you win the lottery balls again and you get your guy, and then the rebuild's over.
Yeah, I mean, there's also, like, let's be completely clear. For as amazing of a job as the Grizzlies front office has done, the most significant part of their tenure is they got lucky. They went from 7 in the draft to 2.
Yeah.
And they also got lucky that they wound up with 2, because no matter what spin zone anyone gives, they would have done the same thing that every team would have done if they went number 1.
They would have taken Zion Williamson. Absolutely. Yes. Of course. Well, the Thunder have admitted years ago they would have taken Odin.
I mean, you know what I mean? It's like there is luck involved. And
so lots of it.
And at a certain point, like, it's your job to not waste luck. I mean, like we talked about with Orlando, this is what, the 3rd time in a decade they're picking 1.
Yeah. Yeah.
They've never done anything with it. Like, so it's your job as a front office, when you get some good luck, build around it.
It's why it's interesting to kind of watch some of these players not want to end up in Orlando. You got some guys that are like, don't really want to end up in Houston because it just hasn't worked out, and you see guys kind of maneuvering to maybe get to San Antonio, maybe to get to some of these places that are more stable environments for young NBA players.
Well, I mean, I don't know. There's also this interesting dynamic for me with, it's not even just the NBA. Like, and honestly, I don't even think it's professional sports. I think you can talk about it with college. I think we're also now seeing it in the world of golf. Are we ever going to have anyone that has any say in this matter that goes, the last person that we're thinking about here is the fans. And in the end, we don't have a sport without them.
No question.
And I understand, I hope that doesn't make me sound too much like Wolken, but I don't think it would, because Wolken would still talk about, how player empowerment's amazing. But like, I also understand so much of sports has changed quickly, not even just college, but in the end, what it really has boiled down to is there's never been a point in time in which the most valuable media property is live sports, and people are willing to pay a ton of money for it because they know they have to have it. And so because of that, it's created this free for all. But at the same time, like, the one thing that I'll give, the European soccer fans, and I understand it's probably not possible here, but the fact that they were able to say, we're forming this Super League, and they go, the hell you are. And they were able to stop it. Like, in the end, I actually think most of the golf fans that are complaining about the Live Golf Tour, I'm sure there are lots of people that are uncomfortable with Saudi, the Saudi involvement, and it's obviously a huge part of it. But you can't look yourself in the mirror and go, I'm being 100% honest. That's what I care about. When literally the president was meeting with Mohammed bin Salih. Like, you know what I mean? Like, in the end, they're on paper, they are a government ally. Like, and, we're about to go make them even richer because we're going to start buying more oil from them. Like, so it's not necessarily that. It's the fact that you understand the way that this is going. You're just going to wind up with two mediocre weekly products. And then, the majors are going to be big deals, but it's like, it's going to suck for golf fans. Like, that's why in the end, that's what people are upset about. Like, when we talk about what's the future of college sports, I don't know of anyone that I discuss it with that sits there and goes, the kids really don't deserve anything. The players, they don't deserve anything. I do think that it's entirely possible to sit there and go, well, maybe the flight simulator and the lazy river are not necessary. I will say this, being an NFL fan, I don't recall many NFL facilities with the 747 flight simulator and a lazy river, and the locker rooms that fold into that essentially become airline beds and whatnot. It's like, okay, those are cool toys, like, but the NFL doesn't have that. And so I just feel like at no point, like, the last thing it feels like, and it's not even the last thing, it's never even considered. Like, I do wonder if you are never taking into the consideration of what the fans think or want. I don't think it's going to come to an end tomorrow. Like, I don't think it's going to be boxing, if you will, or whatnot, like, becomes like, a niche sport or whatnot. But one thing I think we've learned the last couple of years, people off enough, they'll go find something else to do.
Oh, there's no question about it. It's one of the things I'm really interested to see over the course of the next couple of seasons with college football is, like, there's the transfer market makes the sport more transient, obviously, and you don't know as many of the players, and at the college level, you're having to pull out a program at all times to go, no, wait, who's that? Who's that? And
we're like, he's there. Like,
yeah, it's just, yeah.
But I mean, like, in the same thing, like what we're talking about with the NBA, like, maybe it's because it's been so long since we had, but the playoffs kind of sucked this year. And me being like, I'm an NBA guy, but I mean, how many times did you flip on an NBA playoff game kind of excited? Like, yeah, like, Boston, Milwaukee, Boston, Miami, like, or, Dallas and Golden State, and the games just kind of sucked.
Yeah. I wanted Dallas Golden State to be fun, and it wasn't.
And like, I don't know, like, I just wonder, like, in the end, is that, and I understand there's, a lot of this can probably still be traced back to, we still haven't recovered from playing the bubble. You know what I mean? Like, it's just everything was so compressed for so long. But man, I think when your product is a competition, it needs to be good competition.
It does. It has to be. It has to be. Yeah, for sure. Hey, bud, thanks for the time. Really appreciate it. You gave me more.
All right, my wife's yelling at me because dinner's ready.
Talk to you soon.
All right.
That was Jeffrey Wright. Appreciate his time on the show. As always, kind enough to give me a little bit more than an hour of his time. So hope you guys enjoyed that. Hope you enjoyed Chase's interview with Keith Carter as well. We'll put this up as the Friday Oxford Exxon podcast. We appreciate all of you who listen to us, who watch us, who make us a part of your week. Chase on his way to Omaha on Friday. He'll get there on Saturday. He'll be there in time for Ole Miss and Auburn, 6 p.m. on Saturday evening. That's the scheduled time for that game. You can see it on ESPN2. He will have coverage at rebelgrove.com. I will have a postgame show for you guys as soon as the game's over, whether Ole Miss wins or loses. Let's just all cheer for a 9-inning game. Cheer for an Ole Miss win, 9 innings. We'll come here all happy, and we'll talk for a couple hours. But we will hit the button as soon as the game's over. I'll take your calls. We'll talk. Chase will join when he gets to a free spot after the post-game press conference and that type thing. And then we'll visit with him for a while. And then if you guys want, we'll take more calls. If you don't, we'll wrap it up and call it a weekend. Happy Father's Day to everybody out there as well, to the dads in your life. That's on Sunday. And we'll be back. I guess we'll kind of update you over the course of the weekend as to what our schedule is for Monday. Some of it will probably depend on whether Ole Miss wins or loses, I'm guessing, on Saturday. If they win, they won't play again until Monday nights. We'll have a Monday morning podcast. If they lose, they're playing midday on Monday, so we might wait and do the post-game on Monday instead. But we haven't really talked about that. We'll get to that. We'll get to that over the course of the weekend. So until Saturday, you guys take care. Again, thanks for making us a part of your week. We've had big numbers this week. I know all of that is Ole Miss baseball and you guys being excited, but we appreciate you making us a part of that excitement. We've enjoyed the numbers this week. It's been great. We usually don't always have these numbers in June, so it's cool to have them. We certainly appreciate it, and we will talk to you on Saturday.